The sky above Seoul burned orange and red. Massive alien warships blocked the sun. Their shadows fell across the broken city like the hands of angry gods. It was the third week of the invasion, and humanity was losing. Ran through the ruins with blood on his hands, not his own blood. He was a combat medic, only 19 years old, and he had already seen more death than any person should see in a lifetime. His unit was gone, scattered or dead. He did not know which, and he tried not to think about it. They had come from the stars with 10,000 ships. They called themselves the masters of 3-star systems. They looked at Earth and saw only resources to take and slaves to collect. They expected humanity to fall in days. They were wrong, but being wrong did not stop them from killing. Ducked into a collapsed building when he heard the scream of alien engines overhead. A patrol ship passed low, its searchlights cutting through the smoke and dust. He pressed himself against a broken wall and held his breath until the sound faded. That was when he saw the crashed shuttle. It had torn through what used to be a hospital, leaving a trail of destruction behind it. The metal was twisted and burned. Symbols covered its surface, their meaning unknown to him. Smoke rose from cracks in the hull. Knew he should run. Every instinct told him to get away from anything, but he was a medic. His job was to help the wounded, even if the wounded were the enemy. He moved closer. The shuttle's door had been blown open by the crash. Inside, emergency lights flickered red. Bodies lay still in their seats. Soldiers, tall and pale, with silver hair and strange armor, all dead. All except one. She was young. That was his first thought. She looked about his age, maybe younger. Her silver-white hair was matted with blood, and her violet eyes stared at the ceiling without focus. Her breathing was shallow and weak. A piece of metal had torn through her side, and dark blood pooled beneath her. Froze. She wore different armor than the soldiers. Finer, more decorated. Symbols covered her chest plate that he would later learn marked her as royalty. She was princess, third daughter of emperor, heir to an empire that wanted to enslave his entire species. She was his enemy. And she was dying. His hands moved before his mind made a decision. He pulled the medical kit from his bag and dropped to his knees beside her. The metal shard had to come out. The wound had to be closed. She would bleed to death in minutes if he did nothing. Her violet eyes found his face. She tried to speak, but only blood came from her lips. "Don't talk," he said, knowing she could not understand him. "Just don't move." He worked fast. The shard came out cleanly. He packed the wound, applied pressure, used every supply he had. She screamed once, a sound that was not quite human, and then went silent. Her eyes never left his face. When the bleeding stopped, realized he had a bigger problem. He could not leave her here. Search parties would find the shuttle soon. If they found him with their princess, they would kill him. If he left her, she might still die from infection or shock. He did not know why he made the choice he made. Maybe it was because he was tired of death. Maybe it was because she looked so young and scared. Maybe it was simply because leaving a wounded person to die went against everything he believed. He lifted her carefully and carried her into the night. The basement of the collapsed hospital became their hiding place. For 3 weeks, as the war raged above them, kept the alien princess alive. He treated her wounds with salvaged supplies. He shared his food when rations ran low. He talked to her through the long nights when orbital strikes shook the ground and dust fell from the ceiling. At first, she did not understand his words, but she listened, and slowly, day by day, she began to learn. "Do-Wan," she said one night, her accent strange but clear. "Your name." He nodded, surprised. "Yes, and you are." She touched her chest weakly. "I am called." They talked more after that. Simple words at first: water, food, pain, safe. Then harder words: war, home, family, fear. She told him about her world. A planet of endless cities and ancient traditions. an empire that had ruled the stars for thousands of years, a father who saw humanity as insects to crush beneath his boot. He told her about Earth, about Sol before the bombs, about his mother who had died in the first wave of attacks, about his dream of becoming a doctor and helping people. "Why," she asked one night, "why help me? I am enemy." Thought about the question for a long time. "Because you were hurt," he finally said. "Because I could help, that's enough." She stared at him with those violet eyes, and something changed in her expression, something he did not fully understand. On the 15th day, search parties drew close, could hear their scanners sweeping the ruins. There was nowhere to run. They would find him. They would kill him. Took his communication device. Her fingers moved across alien controls he did not understand. A signal went out, a false trail leading the search parties away from their hiding place. She had betrayed her own people, for him. The war ended 3 days later, not with humanity's defeat but with something no one expected, a stalemate. Humans had fought with a fury and cleverness they had never seen, the empire bleeding and broken. On the last night, a rescue shuttle came for. She stood at the basement door, healed enough to walk, wearing a coat had found for her. She looked back at him with eyes full of something neither of them could name. She pressed her forehead to his, a gesture, the deepest form of thanks. "I will remember," she whispered in his language. "Always I will remember you." Then she was gone. Returned to his life. He became a doctor. He married a woman named. He had a daughter named. He rebuilt everything the war had taken. But he never forgot the alien princess with violet eyes, no matter how hard he tried. He never could. 20 years changed many things. The ruins of Sol became a shining city again. Humanity reached beyond its wounded world and built stations among the stars. The empire, once a terror from the heavens, became a distant neighbor that humanity watched with careful eyes. Was 40 years old now. His hair had threads of at the temples. His hands, steady as ever during surgery, sometimes trembled when he was alone with his memories. He worked as a medical consultant for the United Earth Diplomatic Corps where the largest alien embassy on the planet stood like a monument to peace. His wife had died 3 years ago, cancer. He had fought to save her with everything he knew, but some battles could not be won. Now he lived alone in a small apartment, visited often by his daughter, who was 18 and studying to become a. "The delegation arrives tomorrow," his supervisor told him one morning. "Full diplomatic protocol. They want to discuss a formal alliance." Nodded without much interest. He had seen many alien delegations come and go. They were just another species seeking advantage in a complicated galaxy. Then his supervisor said the name. "Their ambassador is Princess, senior diplomat of the Outer Territories. Very important. We need everyone at their best." The coffee cup in his hand slipped. Hot liquid splashed across the table. His hands had started to shake. It could not be her. 20 years was nothing to the who lived for centuries, but surely she would not come to Earth. Surely she had forgotten a few weeks in a basement with a scared human boy. Surely the universe was not so small. He did not sleep that night. The embassy's great hall had been decorated for the arrival. Flags of 100 nations hung beside symbols of alien powers. Thousands of people filled the space. Diplomats, military officers, scientists, journalists, and among them, almost invisible in his white medical coat, stood. He told himself he was being foolish. He would watch from the crowd. She would never notice him. He would see that she had changed, that she was no longer the frightened girl he remembered, and he would finally be able to let go of the memories that haunted his dreams. The doors opened. The delegation entered like a river of silver and violet. Their guards came first, tall and cold in their ceremonial armor. Then came advisors and officials, their faces unreadable. And finally, at the center of them all, came the princess. She was taller than he remembered. Her silver hair fell past her shoulders like water made of moonlight. Her violet eyes swept across the crowd with the calm authority of someone who had commanded armies and conquered worlds. She wore armor that gleamed like starlight, and when she spoke, her voice filled the hall with perfect confidence. Forgot to breathe. She was exactly the same, and she was completely different. The frightened girl from the basement had become a force of nature, a leader, a power in her own right. The speeches began. Earth's leaders welcomed the delegation. They spoke of peace and cooperation and shared futures among the stars. Heard none of it. His eyes never left face. When the formal ceremonies ended, the ambassador began moving through the crowd. She greeted officials with practiced grace. She shook hands with military commanders and smiled at nervous diplomats. Step by step, she drew closer to where stood. His hands would not stop shaking. He gripped them together behind his back and tried to control his breathing. She was 10 meters away, then 5, then 3. Her violet eyes passed over him, then stopped. The universe held its breath. His expression did not change, not in any way the cameras would notice, but saw it, a tiny flicker in those ancient eyes, recognition, memory, something that might have been hope. She stepped toward him. The crowd seemed to part without knowing why. Her guards moved to follow, but she raised one hand and they stopped. She stood before him, close enough to touch, close enough that he could see the faint scar on her neck where a piece of metal had cut her 20 years ago. The princess of the empire, terror of 7 worlds, heir to power beyond imagination, tilted her head slightly and whispered in perfect Korean, "Do you still recall me?" Shaking grew worse. His vision blurred with tears he refused to let fall. His voice, when he found it, came out rough and broken. "Every day," he said. "I remember every day." Something in her expression cracked, just for a moment, just enough for him to see the girl she had been beneath the mask of the woman she had become. "We must speak," she said quietly. "Privately, tonight will you come?" He nodded. He could not speak. He could not think. 20 years of wondering if any of it had been real, and now she stood before him, and his hands would not stop trembling. She touched his arm, just briefly, just enough to be certain he was real. Then she turned and continued through the crowd, and the moment passed, and the world kept spinning as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. That night went to the diplomatic quarters as instructed. A guard he did not recognize led him through quiet hallways to a private suite. The door opened, and there she was, waiting for him. She had removed her armor. She wore simple clothes now, almost human in style. Her silver hair was loose around her shoulders. Without the weight of ceremony, she looked younger, more like the girl he remembered. "I was afraid," she said. "When I decided to come here, I was afraid you would not remember, or that you would hate me for what my people did." "I could never hate you," he said. She smiled. It was a fragile thing, uncertain and hopeful. "I have thought of you often," she said. "In the dark years, in the hard times, I thought of a human boy who saved my life when he should have let me die, and I wondered if he ever thought of me." Always said, "I never stopped." The shaking in his hands began to calm, not because the emotion had faded, but because she took his hands in hers and held them steady. They had 20 years to catch up on, and for the first time since the war, felt like he had finally come home. They talked until the stars faded and the sun began to rise, told him everything she had never been able to say, every truth she had carried alone for 20 years. When she returned to the Empire after the war, they had discovered her betrayal, the false signal she had sent to lead the search parties away from. Her own people had found the record and brought her before a military court. "They called me a traitor," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were distant, lost in memory. "They said I had helped the enemy, that I should die for my crime." "Felt cold, but you didn't die." I am the Emperor's daughter. They could not kill me, but they could punish me." She paused. 5 years. They sent me to a frozen moon at the edge of our territory. No contact, no visitors, just ice and silence and time to think about what I had done. 5 years alone, because she had saved his life. He started, but she shook her head. "Do not feel guilt. I made my choice. I would make it again." She looked at him directly. "Those 5 years gave me time to understand. You showed me something my people had forgotten. Kindness without reason, help without expectation. I had never seen such things before I met you." She told him how she had clawed her way back after the exile. She had studied. She had proven herself in diplomatic missions that no one else would take. She had won battles with words instead of weapons. Slowly, painfully, she had rebuilt her reputation and risen to become one of the most powerful voices in the empire. And through it all, she had carried the memory of a human boy who had bandaged her wounds in a ruined basement. Shared his own story, the nightmares that still woke him some nights, the career he had built as a doctor, saving lives because a dying alien princess had once taught him that compassion knew no species. His marriage, too, a good woman who had loved him even though she knew some part of his heart lived in the past. "She knew about you," he admitted. "I told her about the war, about the princess I saved. She understood. She never asked me to forget." Was quiet for a moment. "She sounds like a good person." "She was. She died 3 years ago." "I am sorry." They sat in silence. The weight of years and loss hung between them, but there was also something else, a connection that had survived time and distance and all the impossible space between their worlds. "I have a daughter," said finally. She is 18. She wants to study alien life." Smiled. "Perhaps I will meet her." "I think she would like that." But their reunion was not meant to be peaceful. The empire was breaking apart from within. Explained it carefully, watching his face as she spoke. Conservative factions wanted war with humanity again. They saw the first invasion's failure as a shame that must be washed away with human blood. Progressive factions, led quietly by herself, wanted genuine peace. And a third faction wanted dead. "They see me as dangerous," she said. "I speak for alliance with humans. I argue against war. This makes me their enemy." "You should have protection," said. "Guards, security." "I have guards, but enemies can be patient and clever." The assassination attempt came that very night. A state dinner had been arranged to celebrate the diplomatic visit. Hundreds of guests filled the embassy's grand ballroom. Earth's leaders sat with nobles. Music played. Wine flowed. Everything seemed perfect. Stood near the medical station, watching the crowd. He could see across the room, speaking with Earth's president. She looked comfortable, confident, every inch the diplomat she had trained herself to become. He noticed the server too late. An embassy staff uniform was moving through the crowd toward. Something about the movement was wrong. Too focused, too direct. No one else seemed to notice. Pushed away from the wall and started walking, then running. The server's hand went to his belt. Metal flashed. Screamed. She turned. Her eyes went wide. The blade descended toward her back. Threw himself between them. The knife meant for a princess buried itself in a doctor's shoulder instead. Pain exploded through his body. He fell against, his weight pushing her backward away from the assassin. Blood poured from his wound. The world turned red and distant. Guards swarmed the attacker. Screams filled the ballroom. Someone was calling for a medic, which struck as funny because he was the medic and he was currently bleeding on the marble floor. Caught him before he fell completely. Her violet eyes were wide with shock, with fear, with something else he could not name through the pain. "Stay awake, look at me, stay with me." He tried to smile, his lips were numb. "Still saving you," he managed. "Old habit." Her hands pressed against his wound. Dark blood seeped between her fingers. She was crying. He had never seen a cry before. He did not know they could. "Do not leave me," she whispered. "Not now, not after I finally found you again." Medical teams arrived. They pulled him away from her, worked on his wound, shouted words he could not understand. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was face. She was still crying. He woke 3 days later in the embassy medical wing. The first thing he saw was silver hair and violet eyes. "You are awake." His voice shook with relief. "The doctor said you would recover, but I had to see for myself." "The assassin?" he asked. His voice was rough. "Captured, he was from one of the conservative factions. They wanted to kill me and blame humans, start the war again." She shook her head. "They failed." "Good." She took his hand. Her grip was strong and warm and real. "You saved my life again," she said. "Why do you keep doing this?" Thought about the question. It was the same question she had asked 20 years ago in a different basement in a different life. His answer was the same. "Because I could, that's enough." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, the gesture of deepest gratitude, deepest connection. "Then I will spend however long we have left," she whispered, making sure it was worth it. Recovery was slow. The blade had cut deep, and even with the best medical technology 2 civilizations could offer, spent 2 weeks in the embassy hospital. But he was never alone. Visited every day. She came in the morning before her diplomatic meetings. She came in the evening when the work was done. She sat beside his bed and talked to him about everything and nothing. The scandal her visits caused among both human and observers did not seem to bother her at all. "People are talking," said one afternoon. "The princess of the empire spending her time with a human doctor. It cannot be good for your reputation." Smiled. "Let them talk. I have spent 20 years caring about what others think. I am tired of it." His daughter came to visit on the 3rd day. She was nervous at first, unsure how to act around the alien princess who sat at her father's bedside, but was warm and curious, asking questions about studies, her dreams, her hopes for the future. "You want to study alien life?" asked. Nodded eagerly. "I want to understand how different species evolved, how they think, how they feel. I believe that understanding leads to peace." Something flickered in his violet eyes. "Your father said something similar once, a long time ago." An unlikely friendship began to form. Was fascinated by culture and biology. Was charmed by the young woman's enthusiasm and intelligence. They spent hours talking while rested, and he watched them with a quiet joy he had not felt in years. But the political crisis would not wait for his recovery. News came from the assassination attempt had been broadcast across the empire. His intervention, his blood spilled to protect their princess, had become a symbol. To some, it proved humanity's honor. To others, it proved corruption. "They say I have been contaminated by humans," told him. Her voice was bitter. "They say I am unfit to represent the empire. The conservative faction demands my recall." There was more. The emperor's father was dying. His sons circled the throne like hungry animals, each seeking power. If returned to face charges of improper connection with humans, she would not survive the political games. "Then don't go back," said. "Stay here, Earth will protect you." "I cannot run," shook her head. "If I flee, everything I have built will be destroyed. The progressive movement, the hope of peace, the future I have tried to create for both our peoples." She paused. "I must return and fight." "Then you will lose." "Perhaps, unless I find a way to change the rules." She told him her plan that night. It was bold, dangerous, possibly insane, but it was also brilliant. Culture valued blood above all else. Family bonds were sacred. Alliances between houses were sealed not just with treaties, but with blood oaths that could never be broken. If could form such a bond with humanity, the conservatives would have no grounds to attack her. "I want to adopt you," she said simply. "Into house, formally, legally. a blood oath that makes you noble in the eyes of my people. Stared at her. You want to make me royalty. I want to make you family. She took his hand. You saved my life twice. You taught me what compassion means. In the eyes of my culture, that creates a debt that can only be repaid with blood. Let me repay it. There was more. Would be offered a position as official human liaison, the first of her kind to hold rank within the court, a symbol of the alliance between species. It is dangerous, admitted. My enemies will hate you. They will call you an animal. They will try to destroy you. But together, we might have a chance to change everything. His hands trembled, but when took them in hers, the shaking stopped. 20 years ago, she said softly, you taught me what humanity means. Let me show my people. He looked at his daughter. Eyes were bright with excitement and fear. This was her dream, a chance to bridge the gap between species, a chance to matter. He looked at the princess, the diplomat, the girl he had saved in a basement, the woman who had crossed the stars to find him again. Yes, he said, I will come with you. The journey to the took 3 weeks. Their ship was a diplomatic vessel, fast and well protected, but the voyage felt like a journey into the unknown. Spent his time learning customs, studied their language with frightening speed, prepared them both for what was coming. My brothers will not welcome you, she warned. Prince especially. He wants the throne and he wants war with humanity. You are a threat to everything he desires. Then we will give him something else to think about, said. They arrived at the under a sky of 3 suns. The planet was ancient beyond imagination. Cities of crystal and metal stretched to every horizon. Ships filled the air like flocks of silver birds. The weight of 1,000 centuries pressed down on shoulders. He was a human doctor from Earth. He was about to challenge the oldest empire in the known galaxy. His hands began to shake again. But was beside him, and was behind him, and for the first time in 20 years he felt like he had a purpose beyond simply surviving. The blood oath ceremony was performed that night, in a chamber of ancient stone, before witnesses from a dozen noble houses cut her palm and pressed it to. Their blood mixed. Words were spoken in a language older than human civilization. And combat medic from Seoul became the first human noble in the history of the empire. The conservatives screamed their outrage. Prince called it an insult to their ancestors. The court divided into factions shouting at each other. But the oath was sealed. The bond could not be broken. Now came the hard part. Had to defend her alliance before the Imperial Senate. The future of 2 species would be decided by words instead of weapons. And had to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. The Imperial Senate chamber was vast beyond comprehension. Stone pillars rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Thousands of senators filled the galleries, their silver hair and violet eyes turned toward the central platform where the fate of empires would be decided. Stood behind them. They were the only humans in a sea of alien faces. The weight of ancient eyes pressed against them like a physical force. Prince spoke first. He was tall even for with cold eyes and a voice like breaking ice. He laid out his case with perfect logic. Humanity was weak. Their victory in the First War was luck and nothing more. The Empire's destiny demanded expansion, and Earth's resources were too valuable to ignore. Its fondness for humans was a sickness, a corruption that proved she was unfit for power. Look at them, said, pointing at animals dressed in noble clothes, insects who dare to stand in the heart of our empire. This is what my sister brings us. This is her vision for our future. Weakness, shame, the contamination of everything our ancestors built. The senators murmured, many nodded in agreement. I call for the removal of these creatures from our sacred chamber, declared, and for my sister to face judgment for her crimes against our people. Rose to respond, to defend her alliance, to defend the humans she had brought into her world. Stopped her. The chamber fell silent as the human doctor stepped forward. He was not supposed to speak. He had no right to address the Senate, but something in his eyes made even Prince pause. "I ask permission to speak," said. His voice was steady. His hands, for once, were still. Laughed. "The animal wants to speak. Let it speak. Let everyone see the foolishness my sister has brought among us." The Senate Master, ancient and tired, nodded slowly. "You may speak, human." Walked to the center of the platform. He looked up at the thousands of faces watching him. He thought about soul burning, about a dying princess in a crashed shuttle, about 20 years of wondering if any of it had mattered. Then he spoke. "20 years ago, your empire came to my world. You came with 10,000 ships and weapons beyond our understanding. You thought we would fall in days. You called us primitive, weak, animals." He paused. The silence was absolute. "You were wrong. We fought. We bled. We died by the millions, but we did not fall. Your mighty empire with all its power could not break us, and I think that made you angry. I think it still makes you angry, because if we are animals, how could we have stopped you?" Prince's face twisted with rage. "You survived through luck and nothing more." "Perhaps," said, "but let me tell you about the war from my side. Let me tell you what I saw." He told them about the basement, about finding a princess, wounded and dying in the ruins of a hospital, about the choice he faced. He could have let her die. He could have killed her himself. She was the enemy. Her people had murdered his mother. Her father's ships had burned his city to ash. But he did not let her die. "I saved her because she was hurt," he said, "because I could help. That is what humans do. We see suffering and we try to end it, even for our enemies, even when it costs us everything." He looked at. She was watching him with tears in her violet eyes. "Your princess learned something in that basement. She learned that there are things more powerful than empire, more lasting than conquest. She learned that kindness without expectation of reward is the greatest strength in the universe." He turned back to the senators. "You call us primitive. Perhaps. We have not conquered stars. We have not built empires that last 1,000 years. But we have learned something in our short history that your long centuries seem to have forgotten." His voice rose, filling the ancient chamber. "Strength is not proven by conquest. It is proven by the choice to show mercy when you have every right to destroy. It is proven by saving your enemy when letting them die would be easier. It is proven by reaching across the void between stars and choosing connection over conflict." He pointed at, "Your princess learned this. 20 years ago, in the ruins of a world you tried to break, she chose to save me, and I chose to save her. That is why we are both still standing. That is why our species can stand together." He looked directly at Prince. "You may call that weakness, but I have stood in the fire of war. I have taken a blade meant for your princess. I have crossed the stars to stand before this Senate, and I am still standing." His voice dropped to something almost soft, almost gentle. "That is the human way. We endure, we adapt, we survive, and we remember. We always remember those who stood with us in the darkness." Silence. The silence stretched for an eternity. Then from the upper galleries, a single senator rose, an ancient woman with silver hair like starlight. She struck her ceremonial staff against the marble floor. The sound echoed through the chamber like a thunderclap. Another senator rose, then another, then a dozen, then hundreds. The sound of striking staffs filled the air, drowning out everything else. The vote was called. It was not unanimous. Prince and his faction voted against the alliance, but they were outnumbered, outmatched, outmaneuvered by a human doctor who had reminded an ancient empire what strength really meant. The alliance held. The emperor died peacefully 3 days later. He had lived long enough to see his daughter's victory, long enough to know that his empire would survive not through conquest, but through wisdom. Did not take the throne. She did not want it. Instead, she became the empire's chief diplomat, the voice of a new era of cooperation between species, stayed at her side as human liaison, learning and growing and building bridges that would last for generations. And stayed too. One evening, weeks after the vote, found him on a balcony overlooking the Imperial Gardens. Alien flowers glowed beneath 3 moons. The sky was filled with stars he did not recognize. "You are trembling again," she said softly. He looked down at his hands. She was right. The shaking had returned. "I think I always will," he admitted, "when I look at you." She stepped closer, took his hands in hers. The trembling did not stop. "Then we will tremble together," she whispered, "for whatever years remain." She pressed her forehead to his, the gesture of deepest connection, the same gesture she had used 20 years ago in a ruined basement on a burning world. "Thank you," she said, "for remembering me." "Always," he replied, "I will always remember." Above them, the stars shone on, witnesses to a love that had crossed the impossible distance between worlds, a love that had proven stronger than empire and war, a love that had reminded 2 species that the greatest power in the universe was not the strength to destroy. It was the courage to remember. And neither of them would ever forget again.